Yeah, no, you're good. So, when would you say the Reign of Terror began?
It's a good question. There's a lot of debate around when it began. I'd say the Reign of Terror began following the storming of the Tuileries in August of 1792 and the September massacres. After this, Louis XVI was brought to trial for treason and condemned to death by the National Convention on January 18th of 1793. His last words, "I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. I pardon those who have occasioned my death, and I pray to God that the blood you are going to shed may never be visited on France." The January regicides then began to take shape.
Well, almost immediately after Louis's execution, the convention broke off diplomatic ties with England. On around February 1st, 1793, they declared war on both Great Britain and the Dutch Republic, starting a war that pitted France against numerous other European monarchies until 1802, even after the Revolution's end. On March 4th, rioting began in Cholet, causing open revolutions to break out in the Vendée by March 13th. The rebels were badly beaten throughout this war, losing over 15,000 men. Their forces were finally defeated by the Republic on December 23rd.
Professor, tell us about Marat.
Okay. In April, the Committee of Public Safety was established by the convention. Jean-Paul Marat was elected to be head of the Radical Jacobin Club. He was arrested by the Girondins, a conservative offshoot faction of the Jacobins, for his newspaper, L'Armée des Peuples. He was acquitted and released on April 24th.
On May 26, 1793, Marat and Robespierre called for an insurrection against the convention. From May 31st to June 2nd, the Jacobin coup d'etat took place. The Girondins, who had been primary leaders of the revolution, were defeated by a mob of sans-culottes who had been organized by the Jacobins to storm the hall of the convention. The victorious Jacobins forced the convention to vote for the rest of 29 Girondins, which finally ended the Girondist reign of power.
On July 3rd, King Louis XVII, who was only 8 years old at the time, was taken from his mother, Marie Antoinette, and was put under the surveillance of Antoine Simon, a cobbler and representative of the Commune, who would raise him to be an ideal product of the revolution. He was kept in solitary confinement, however, separately from his mother, until his death by neglect and tuberculosis at the age of only 10 years old.
Marat was assassinated by a woman. Charlotte Corday was a young Girondine who disguised herself as a supporter of Marat and was given permission to meet with him. Marat had a skin infection and as a result conducted many of his meetings from a medicinal bath. On July 13th, Corday approached Marat in his bath and stabbed him in the chest. She was guillotined 4 days later.
In August, Marie Antoinette was transferred from the Temple, where the royal family was jailed, to the Conciergerie, where the political prisoners were taken before being guillotined. That same month, Robespierre, who had previously been head of the Committee of Public Safety, was made the head of the convention.
As a way to increase civilian devotion to the revolution, the convention decreed levee en masse on August 23rd, which required that all unmarried men between the ages of 8 and 25 serve in the army. It was about a month after this that some say the Reign of Terror really began. It was the law of suspects, which legally allowed the convention to arrest those who either by their conduct or by their relationships, by their remarks, or by their writing are shown to be partisans of tyranny. and federalism and enemies of liberty.
Revolutionaries wanted to sever all ties with the monarchy, including traditions and holidays. So on October 5th of 1793, they instituted the Republican calendar, but it only ended up being in use until 1805.
No, Professor. No, it's good. All right, tell us about Marie.
After 2 months of being held in the Conciergerie, Marie Antoinette was charged before the Revolutionary Tribunal with treason. She was sentenced to death and was guillotined at La Place de la Révolution on October 16th. Only a few weeks later, the first notable mass execution of the revolution happened. 22 Girondists were executed on October 31st after being tried before the Revolutionary Tribunal on October 24th. This was the first of many executions of Girondists in the Purge of the Girondists.
Okay, Professor, talk about the Vendée.
So, the defeat of the Vendée army at Le Mans occurred on December 12th. Around 15,000 were killed, and 11 days later, the Vendée army was completely decimated at Savenay by Republican forces. Following said defeat, on January 8th, Robespierre denounced a former friend, Fabre d'Églantine, which increased pre-existing tensions between Robespierre's associates. In supporting Danton, the Desmoulins received negative attention from not only the association with Fabre, but because of their refusal to burn the third issue of Le Vieux Cordelier, which they believed Robespierre's concept of what's counter-revolutionary to be wrong. Soon after the denouncement, the arrest of Fabre d'Églantine took place on January 13th.
Moving forward, on February 4th, the convention voted to abolish slavery in the French colonies. As a result, the number of military personnel skyrocketed, from newly freed slaves joining their ranks, which benefited the struggle against the British and Spanish. The new decree granted them the same rights as any other French citizen.
One of Robespierre's more famous convention lectures centers on the importance and necessity of the terror. On February 5th, he claimed, "If the spring of popular government in the time of peace is virtue, the springs of popular government in revolution are at once virtue and terror. Virtue without terror is fatal. Terror without virtue is powerless." Paralleling Robespierre's climb to power, a new figure emerged. Napoleon Bonaparte, a rising captain, was promoted to general on February 6, 1794, adding power behind Robespierre's name solely through association.
Hebert and the leaders of the Cordeliers were executed on March 24th, and soon Danton, the Desmoulins, and their supporters were executed on March 30th, officially ending the Cordeliers' Club. Not soon after, Robespierre created a new bureau of police on April 1st, which primarily focused on the supervision of those in office. Robespierre also tried to establish a new state religion in replacement of Catholicism on May 7th. This was known as the existence of the Supreme Being. 3 days later, Madame Elizabeth, the sister of Louis XVI, was executed.
Robespierre was elected president of the National Convention on June 4th, and the Festival of the Supreme Being commenced on June 8th. 6 days after Robespierre is unanimously elected, the law of the 22nd Prairial passed, which permitted the tribunal to convict suspects who lacked counsel, which increased the number of jurors and judges, which in turn increased the number of executions.